Fair housing has been a pillar in the real estate community for many years. And today we're going to talk about some of the ins and outs of fair housing and how it can impact you as someone who owns property or someone looking to buy property. Stay tuned to this episode for more.
The Den, powered by the Lions Group, a show that explores trending topics in real estate, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. We're a small team of professionals with over $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 successful transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Today, we're going to talk about the Fair Housing Act and how it applies to real estate and some of the things that you need to be cognizant of if you own real estate or are looking to rent your real estate or looking eventually to buy, just things to be aware of. 1968, the Title VIII Civil Rights Act really became known as the Fair Housing Act and was signed into law by Lyndon B. Johnson. And it really is a cornerstone, a pillar of how we operate in today's world. And real estate's evolved over time, but it lays down the foundation of non-discriminatory acts in the field of real estate. So we're going to dive into that today and how it can be applied still today and some of the things that we face in real estate as professionals and some of the things you need to be aware of. So Aspen, the ninja, kicking it off with you, because I know you've done a lot of short-term rentals over the years. Let's kind of go into that space a little bit. When you're advertising for short-term rentals, what are the things that you kind of avoid or know that are red flags to say in your marketing that you just don't do because you know it would violate fair housing?
So short-term renting is a little bit different than house sales. So you can't, discriminate in any way, but we can set check-in limits for age and things like that. So it's a little bit different. One thing that I think people don't think about with short-term rentals is if someone has a service animal, you have to let them bring the service animal in at no additional charge, no additional fee. You can ask what they do, what service the animal provides, and that's it. And then you just have to say, okay. So that's one thing that, And
so service animals are covered under the Fair Housing Act because the Fair Housing Act has, protects race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status. Now, sex and familial status was added years later, but it also covers disabilities. And so what you're saying is if someone has a service animal, then that's probably covered under the disability component. Is that correct?
It absolutely is covered under it. Yeah, you can't. And it's the only restriction that you can say is you can't leave the animal home alone. And service animals are dogs and miniature ponies.
It can't be your turtle, Paul?
Can't be your turtle.
No, those are, what are they called? Comfort animals?
Oh, emotional support.
Emotional support.
Yeah, that's not, that does not.
Yeah, that does not fall under the ADA.
The boa snake that you've got, the little mini python. Yeah.
But if you bring a mini pony.
A mini pony.
Yeah.
So ponies and dogs.
Don't tell my wife.
Yeah. Mini ponies.
So like a Shetland?
I have no idea. I've never had anyone bring a miniature pony, but it is technically, they can be service animals.
That's wild that they have put two categories, dogs and mini ponies. That's interesting. Yep. But so you're saying you can't say no to those at all.
No.
No,
and then you have to make reasonable accommodations. So, and if you're promoting it as a, what's the word? Where
like pet friendly or
no, for people with disabilities. If you say there's no steps, there can't be any steps. Right. Not even. It's like a 2-inch gap. Yeah. If your doors have to be certain wide. So there's a lot of things.
ADA compliance.
Yeah, for ADA compliance, you have to have all of these things. And if someone asks you to make reasonable accommodations, then you have to let them. So I don't do this. I let people control their own thermostat, but some people with health issues need it colder or hotter. And I know some short-term rentals only let it go to a certain range. So if someone asked you to change the range based on a health condition, you have to provide that reasonable accommodation for them.
Yeah, because some of those people have the thermostat under lock and key.
Yeah.
You can't touch them.
Yeah, I don't do that. There's a lot of stuff that I don't do that other people do. So I kind of just have it open for everybody. I also don't have a minimum age limit to check in. But a lot of people do.
So you don't have check-in limits for like 18 and under, or?
Oh yeah, 18. You have to be 18 to
Okay.
have an account.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. I mean, so you can't say, hey, you have to be 20
no.
to check in because the legal age is 18.
Yeah, a lot of people say 24. It's like rental car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's more for liability purposes.
It's for liability, but
it creates a gray area, though.
It is a gray area. And I'm like, all these issues, I'm like, I've had issues with older people and younger. I don't think there's like no one stands out more than the other.
Hi, I'm Shannon, a partner at the Lions Group. We're dedicated to making your real estate experience the best it can be. If you're looking to buy or sell, go to sjcbroker.com and watch our informational video series. These videos break down the process and shed some light on buying or selling. While you're there, schedule a private consultation with one of our partners. We'd love to sit down, talk strategy, and give you the real advantage in today's market. You deserve the best, so take the steps, and we'll talk to you soon. Now back to the show.
That was pretty defined, like short-term rentals. But let's broaden the scope a little bit to apply more to the everyday person. And let's talk about real estate agents in general. Paul, what do you see that are some of the clearer violations of the Fair Housing Act just in marketing normal real estate for sale?
Well, you don't see it very often, but when you do see it, it stands out quite a bit. You can't use terms like family friendly. We have a new, I don't want to say the wrong word here, Church of Latter-day Saints temple here. So I know a lot of people, or not a lot, but there have been a few that were close to the temple or temple views, all that kind of, and you can't say those because you're targeting or you're promoting one certain religion over another.
You can't say stuff like great Christian neighborhood.
No.
Walking distance too.
Yeah, there's so many things. The National Association of Realtors gives us a long list of things that we can't say. It's pretty interesting when you look at it because you can see the history and how it's evolved. So you can't say
master bedroom. We say primary bedroom.
Yeah, that's a great example. A lot of times back when in the 60s, 50s and 60s with certain segregation laws, you can't say, of course, all those things. I don't want to say any of them because then I'll get in trouble.
We still have those. I mean, we see restrictive covenants all the time that discriminate against certain people of national origins or religions. Yeah. And that even though they're still in the covenants, they're not enforceable any longer.
Yeah. In fact, the title company specifically excludes that language because there are covenants that were recorded many, many years ago. I mean, 50, 60, 70 years ago that violated what are the, Fair Housing Act of today and before 1968. So some of those subdivisions have covenants still of record that say, no this minority group, no that minority group. And I've seen them. Yeah. And then the title company will come in and exclude those and say that's not applicable to this component or to this transaction. But there is a very specific exclusion that they put in there, which is to me fascinating. It seems like so far ago that this type of stuff was really happening, but it really wasn't.
It wasn't far at all.
Yeah, which is really kind of mind-boggling.
Well, one of the things when you brought this topic up, the one thing that I was thinking of is it's been almost 60 years since this was passed, and we're still talking about it today. And especially, like my daughter, we just dropped her off to college, and we talked about, do you want an all-girl dorm? Do you want mixed dorm? And I've been hearing across the country, people want to go back to segregated dorms, and those conversations are happening. And I think what's going on is kind of not the consensus, but the thought in some groups is that we've homogenized the U.S. so much that they want to get back to having their culture protected. And so there's opposing viewpoints on all of this right now. Not saying that we want to discriminate against anybody, but we want certain groups want to be able to promote their own culture to make sure that they're not getting too far away from it. Especially the college campus stuff is what I've been seeing.
I think colleges, though, it's like if you want to go to an all-girls college, if you want to go to a Christian college, you have the opportunity to do that. I just don't think you can go to a college, let's just use that Christian example. But if you go to a Christian college and then expect them to change to a different religion, it's like, no, this is what you
You
is
knew
what you were doing.
getting. What you
Yeah.
had.
You know
So
what
I
you
think
signed up for.
so I think it's kind of the vice versa too. If you are going to a college and they only have mixed dorms, that's what you sign up for. You can't.
Yeah.
It's like, and I don't think any colleges like are just mixed dorms or whatever. I think you can normally choose if you want girls, boys, mixed, whatever. But
My
there
daughter's
is
in a mixed. We didn't know it was mixed until we got there, and I was like, oh no,
who's this guy?
Oh, no. Not in the rooms, but
Yeah.
right down the hall.
Right
there's-
across the hall. Yeah.
So I looked at my wife, and we were both like, "Well,
Well.
it's too late now."
Yeah. Well, and in the Fair Housing Act, I mean, so let's just go through the main components. It's race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. And sex used to be men and women. Now that's changed into, your sexual orientation or who you identify as. And some states have overlays on top of the Fair Housing Act. Like New Mexico specifically, you can't discriminate on ancestry. So who your ancestors were, you can't be discriminated against that. Now, I don't know any instances where that's, applicable, but apparently it's happened that, maybe you
I'm sure it has.
Yeah,
if you think
I
back
mean,
to like eugenics, you used to have to show, your ancestry lines,
And this was
family
added,
tree.
I mean, I would say within recent years. So I guess if you had Spanish descent, you couldn't be discriminated against that. I mean, I think that to me, that kind of falls under national origin, but I guess there's some delineation there. So I don't know, but there are layers to this as well. So you have to be really careful because some of the things that you may not, but that you may think are good to say really actually violate the Fair Housing Act. And HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, is basically enforces that, and they will come after you. They will, you can face fines and even prison time in certain instances, which is, probably something that needs to happen if people are really out there breaking these rules, because there's a whole reason why we have this Fair Housing Act. I mean, I always tell clients, I'm like, we don't discriminate against anyone. If you have a briefcase full of hundreds, we're going to sell the property, right? I mean, that's really how you should view it is, are you a viable, capable buyer that's trying to purchase a property? Doesn't matter who you identify as, where you came from, what your familial status is, what your age is, other than being of legal age, then you have the capability to buy that property. You should be a viable buyer and treated as such.
I think it's really interesting that the Fair Housing came out before ECOA did, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, because we can't discriminate against, especially like, let's say, sex or minorities, but you couldn't get a loan. You couldn't have your own bank account. There's a lot of, if you were married, you had to have your husband sign off on things. So,
You're talking about females in particular.
Yeah, women and minorities, but specifically women couldn't have even their own bank account until, what was it, like 1978?
70 something.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
like
this
late
wasn't that long
70s.
ago.
So it's funny hearing, like, when I talk to my I have a lot of grandmas, and every single one of them talks about mattress money. You got to have your own money. You have to have your own stuff. They're very, very vocal about it because, I mean, parents could not they couldn't, especially grandmas, mothers couldn't get their own house until they could actually get the lending for it. So you can say, oh, well, we couldn't discriminate then, but if you couldn't get a loan, what were you going to do?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't until the 70s that NAR took discrimination out of their code of ethics, because up until then they said you have to follow the social norms, which is redlining and steering and all of that kind of stuff to try to segregate certain people into certain areas. And I remember a conversation I had with Aspen a couple of years ago when they were bringing out some new training for us, NAR was, and I was like, well, we don't have this stuff here. This is, and I respect Aspen's opinion on things. So I said that to her, and she gave me that look like, you are the dumbest person in the world. Yes, we do. And then from then, I said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to be open-minded, and I'm going to look for instances. And it was almost immediate. I was hearing either racist comments or derogatory terms, or, and it's a lot of times we think about race, but if you think about it, it's mostly against women, in my opinion.
In our area, maybe.
In our area.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, there's those two things, especially in this industry, I think it's a lot about women. But in housing, I think there's a lot of, it could be about race a little bit more.
I think whenever we're looking at the history too, I think we'd be remiss to not talk about, we talk about how, well, anyone can do it now. Anyone can buy a home. Anyone can do that. That's all good and well. And that might be true. There's a lot more, things in place to protect you as a person whenever you're buying a house. But we're talking about generational wealth that, being able to own a home is, and also not even that, how do you do it? If you don't even know how to do it and you weren't taught how to do that, it is a lot harder to learn how to, buy a house, what you need to do, what you need to save for, what your options are. So it's more than just, well, yeah, you can go get a house now. Anyone can go get a house now. I don't think here it's as big of an issue. We have pretty affordable housing. It's a lot more open for everybody. Realistically, you can afford to buy a house here if you really were saving. You don't have to save for years. But if you're in a bigger city or even somewhere where the house prices are much higher, if you don't have family to help you, it's probably going to be a lot harder to buy a house.
So is that a fair housing issue, though?
I think it is.
How do you weave that into the Fair Housing Act?
I think it's a fair housing issue because, like we just said, it wasn't until 1968 that the Fair Housing Act came in. It was 1968, right?
Yeah, 1968.
And then 1974 was ECOA, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, where you could actually get a loan. This was not long ago at all.
I was born in the 70s.
Yeah.
So this is, in my lifetime, these are issues that were happening.
Exactly. So it's like, imagine if you were a minority single mom. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't even have known what your options were because she wouldn't have been she would have been renting.
Sure.
So it's kind of one of those things. We can say it's because it's not so far removed. I think it absolutely affects fair housing today. Now, there's the restrictions in place that you're not going to be necessarily discriminated against. We have rules, but what if your buyer or your seller doesn't want to work with the other side of the party because of their, we have cameras now.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I don't want to sell to that family.
Sure.
Or I only want to sell to someone with kids.
And that's a big argument right there for not doing love letters.
Yep.
For our audience. Love letters are basically letters that buyers write saying, this is me, this is who I am, this is about me, my family, or whatever it is. And then if a seller decides, hey, I got a second offer and I want to go with this offer, not with the one that wrote the letter, then they could be accused of not going with that particular person because of what's in that letter. So, we here locally, in this room, I should say, kind of discourage love letters. Some buyers want to submit them. It's up to the seller if they want to entertain them or not. But there are consequences to those. I know you've had an instance where a love letter actually worked.
But it wasn't anything with fair housing.
Yes,
it was completely.
And
separate.
that's actually a pretty rare occasion where there's nothing that it involves fair housing in that instance.
I think it's easy to talk about race and sex because that's what we see most of the time. But even just wanting to sell, if you have a couple that's not married, they have two different last names on the contract, and then you have a family that you saw on the camera and they're coming in, two exact offers, and you raised your kids here and you want to sell to the people with kids, that goes against fair housing.
Yeah.
You have to completely take it out. So, and maybe it's not malicious. They're not intentionally discriminating against the couple or the unmarried couple or the single person, but that is against fair housing.
Yeah. And that's the same thing as like saying the verbiage in your marketing of family friendly. It's not that you wouldn't want empty nesters, but that specifically says family friendly, which would eliminate, empty nesters wanting to look or at least give it that slant. And that's a violation. Right there. So, a lot of these things, like you just said, are not intentional. If you talk to that person that wrote family friendly, they're like, oh, of course. Yeah, we would love to have an empty nester or anybody, but we just wanted to,
but there's a huge playground in the back and it's a bunch of stairs in the house. So we just assumed.
Yeah.
You kind of just have to, you don't want to focus about who's moving in, just what the house is. Yeah. That's what we kind of tell.
Yeah.
We all have, I read through recently at an orientation, I was reading through what's restricted by NAR, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
some of these are slipping through the cracks.
Yeah. Well, like the walking component, let's talk about that real quick. You mentioned this, Paul. You can't say walking distance to a park. Is that right?
Correct.
And why?
Well, because there could possibly be somebody that's looking to buy that is not walking, is bound to a wheelchair or It doesn't have the capacity with like a disease or a condition that doesn't allow them to walk, so they would have to drive wherever they go.
But you could say 800 feet from a park.
Yep.
0.2 miles from a park.
Yeah. So there are ways to get around. I mean,
but it gets, you can't even say nearby or close to anymore.
You can say, like, you have to be specific about where it is. One thing I think is weird is that we can say views. Like, if there are views, you can still say, mountain views.
Yeah.
Lake views.
Which is weird because you have, what if somebody wants to buy that is
blind,
sight impaired?
Yeah. And that's what I was just going to say, playing devil's advocate. I mean, at what point do we go down this so far that it just doesn't make sense?
I don't think it makes sense that we can't say it's by the temple or by, like, if it's across the street from the temple or across the street from the Baptist church or across the street from anything, I would want to know.
Yeah, it's a landmark.
Yeah, if I'm not from the area, it's not because it's actually for the opposite reason. It's not because I would want to live near those things. It's because I would not want to live near those things. It's just like
an airport or a railroad
across the street
track.
from a school. I would want to know because, that's going to be busy every day from 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And a church, it's going to be busy on Sundays and Wednesday nights. Like, it's just, and it's going to be louder. And I would want to know those things. So I think, and I get why, because we're not trying to steer people into certain neighborhoods based on religion. But if it's important to them, I think it should be a searchable feature.
I agree. I mean, I think it becomes a slippery slope when you can't say walking distance. And then, next thing you know, that the views, because of that reason, there may be some people that are sight impaired or blind. I mean, at what point do you go, okay, this is just kind of getting silly. You can't say anything about the property or describe the property in any way.
Well, we go so far the other way, and the public, I don't think is thinking about any of this. Because I have an experience when I first got into real estate. I had a lovely couple. Both of them are salt of the earth, best people I ever met. Same-sex couple, 2 women, and they were, should we take all of our personal items off the wall? Do we want anybody to know that we were here? And I said, if anybody's going to be discriminating that way, you don't want them in your house. So there's a bias. I don't know how to say this. The buyers and sellers have their own things that they're going through with, I'm going to be discriminated against. So we've made it so bad that I think
the pendulum swings, right?
I think there's certain things too. It's like if you have a bunch of like animal heads on the wall, or
my father-in-law's house,
or a whole collage of crosses.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe we take, if it's like one cross, it's like, no, leave it up. It's fine. If it's, I'm like, animal heads are pretty divisive to some people. Like, that's a real big turnoff for some people. So there's certain things where I'm like, yeah, let's take it down. But if it's one cross or a little, setup that they have or a prayer thing, I'm like, just leave that, because we're not trying to erase who you are.
And then we have some sellers.
If it's distracting, that's when we...
And I have a seller I'm working with right now, and he's like, what do you think of all the trophy mounts? And I said, well, we could probably thin them out a bit. But at the same time, he's like, but I do want to show that you can have, if you're someone that wants trophy mounts, we have the room. This will fit in here, and this is how it can be used. And
maybe a picture beforehand. And then...
fair point. And because that's the type, they built that room specifically for the mounts. So you do have both sides of the coin.
I think Danielle McCulloch did really good with that. She had one where it was just like everywhere. They were like from the floor to the ceiling, and she did some virtual staging to show it without because it was so much that it was like
you couldn't get past it.
And so she did virtual staging to show the opposite.
Okay, quiz time. What is the number one complaint to HUD over the Fair Housing Act? Paul?
You just said
I know, I was like, this is kind of bad because it's not really a quiz. It's like where the teacher told us what the question and answer was before we came into
it. ADA things.
Disabilities. Yes. So the number one complaint to HUD, because you have a platform, you could have a channel if you feel like you've been discriminated against. So you can go right through the HUD platform and file a complaint, and there's a process and procedures there. The number one complaint is over disabilities. And why would that be the case? Because it says in the Fair Housing Act that you have to make what Aspen?
Reasonable accommodations.
Reasonable accommodations to handle someone with disabilities or help someone with disabilities in the real estate arena. So what does that mean? So let's say you have a 2-story apartment complex and they say, hey, look, you have one available on the main floor, which is great. I need a little bit bigger space to park because I have to get my equipment out and I just need more room, obviously, like a handicap space, obviously. Can I take this section of your parking lot and maybe eat into half of another space and maybe we can figure something out there? And a landlord says, no, absolutely not. You think that's a reasonable response from a landlord? Absolutely not. Landlord should probably say, hey, let's make something work where you're able and comfortable to be getting in and out of your vehicle to access your unit. In my opinion, a very easy way to make it ADA compliant for a potential tenant. But that's just an example. Do you have any other examples that you would like to share in regard to the disability component? What would be a reasonable accommodation?
Sometimes I'll see, and it kind of makes sense actually that the ADA is the most, because I'm sure it's from tenants. I'm almost positive that that's where the complaints are coming in because I think a lot of tenants are more familiar with their rights now. So it makes sense that would be I don't think it's like the home buying process that's, complaining, or not complaining, filing the complaints is what I meant to say. But if you ask someone to put in an elevator, that's not a reasonable request.
Yeah.
But if you ask if it's okay if you put in a lift, and the tenant is like, I'm going to pay for it, but I would like to put in this lift to get me to my second floor. That's a reasonable request. It is.
I would agree.
Well, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And
but if you're asking the landlord to pay for it, that's where it's like, well, is that reasonable to ask?
And I think the rule is that the tenant would pay for it and then bring it back to the original state when they're done.
Yeah.
Or when they move out.
Wider door frames for a wheelchair.
Yeah, that could be a reasonable request. I think ramps, those types of things.
I think a landlord putting in ramps would be a reasonable request. Not to a second floor, but to, if it was a 1 unit, 1 story, but there's 2-3 steps.
Yeah, a few steps.
I think a landlord putting in a ramp would be reasonable.
Yeah, and that's also, called being a good person.
Exactly.
Did you have to?
I don't think you can say that anymore.
Yeah, I can't. Why?
No, you can't say anything anymore.
We're
in trouble with this whole thing.
This whole session is up in flames here, people. So don't turn us into.
If we said anything, just erase it.
You know what they say about the road to hell, though.
Yeah.
Paved with good intentions.
That's right. That's right. So we're on the road. We're on the highway to hell. Yeah. Hey, that's a great song.
I think if you're just constantly learning and trying to, being open-minded, you'll hear stories about, that does make sense. And that is why we should be doing it. And this stuff is happening today.
And I think genuinely, if a response is, hey, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to do anything for you, tenant or buyer. You got to figure it out.
You can't bring your service animal in here.
Yeah. I mean, those are the people that are being flagged. If it's like, oh, I didn't realize that. Well, let me see what I can do. Oh, I don't have the money, but we can work on a plan together. If you're doing something like that, it's very unlikely you're going to be flagged for, simply because you may not have the resources, but your intentions are to work with that tenant or whatever. Probably a long shot that you're going to be called to the mat on the Fair Housing Act, but you have to have those good intentions. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to. I would say that, taking action in some manner to try to help the situation is good. It's like when, we close on a house, someone calls me and says, hey, the pipes are leaking, under the sink. And what do I say? A welcome to home ownership, or, hey, what can I do to help? I mean, there's two different approaches there. One obviously is becoming or being a good person and trying to do the best thing that you can. The other one is like, well, whatever,
Yeah, I think we see it too with even going back to the short-term rentals. I've had some people that they're allergic to artificial scents. So they asked if we could wash everything in vinegar instead. Of course, that's easy to do. Or if one person didn't want the waves from everything plugged in, so they asked if we would unplug
the white noise.
Yeah, well, my white noise. I always have that, but they like the electronic, the electromagnetic waves. So they wanted us to unplug the microwave, unplug the stove, unplug the lamps. It's sure, that's easy. I mean, sounds
understood.
Good. I think if people just make a bigger deal out of anything and just want to dig their feet in, when it's it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal.
Let it run.
Yeah.
So, well, we're winding down on time. Fantastic discussion. I mean, we could probably talk for a couple hours specifically about this and go deep on it, but we're limited to time. So thank you for the great discussion today. And thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, you can go on to sjcbroker.com and schedule a consultation, a private consultation with any one of us here at the Lions Group. We'd love to sit down with you, whether you're buying or selling commercial or real estate, and give you an advantage in today's market. And thank you again for listening to this episode of The Den. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den, powered by the Lions Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed and check the show notes below for direct links to our buyer and seller video series. The buyer and seller video series can give you an inside track on taking the right steps in real estate. If you'd like to learn more about the Lions Group or to schedule a consultation, go to sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lions Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.